The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, Concordant Body, Appendant Body, Masonic Authority, or CraftsmanOnline.com.
Hey, welcome back to the Craftsman Online podcast, the only Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York. I'm your host, Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. Ooh, we have a good one this week as we get into persuasive leadership and the science behind it. But first, quick thanks to our Patreon subscribers. Yeah, we offer that free 7-day trial for you to test it out. Do you want ad-free episodes? Would you like access to all of our extra bonus time with select guests? Sorry if it sounds like a sales pitch, but it kind of is. It's only $5 a month to support Craftsman Online on Patreon. That's what you get. What we get, it makes this whole entire podcast thing possible. From the software to the website to the emails that we send out, your $5 truly is the fuel that drives our mission to bring Freemasonry to those who have an interest in it. As I've mentioned before, we don't start out our seasons with a particular theme in mind, but for year number 6, we have talked a lot about leadership, and this brother, I would say, is safely an expert in it. A college professor at Arizona State University, Worshipful Brother Ted Cross. Welcome back to the Craftsman Online podcast.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Dude, we are going to be talking about leadership with a capital L, and I have been excited to jump into this with you because this is something that I don't think we talk enough about in our lodges and just in generally about Freemasonry. Before we jump into it and your program that you've talked about, Convince the Science of Leadership, just for our listeners' benefit, what is your background on this topic?
So I've been a professor of leadership and management at many different institutions. I have a doctorate in leadership and management from Pepperdine University, a master's from University of Pennsylvania, and various other credentials in human resource management. So I really teach and work in this area. And so I'm excited to sort of, how can we simplify some of the steps down from the research that we know and make it more useful for people?
And just like you, I have an MBA in leadership as well, and a collection of books in my bookcase of ones that I have read and promised to read myself, but to get better at this, because it's more than just something that is going to be a benefit to our lodges and to our fraternity, but mainly to our brothers. And a lot of leadership, at least as you talk about in your presentation, kind of centers around the power to persuade. Why is that one of the areas that you tackle in this program?
The reason I talk about persuasion is that the simple model of leadership that I present is 3 steps. First, you need to create a compelling vision. Second, you need to motivate people towards that vision. And third, you got to correct course along the way. And so all of that, unless you're a real micromanager, top-down type person, usually involves some sort of influence and persuasion, particularly if we're talking about working in lodges or nonprofit situations or clubs where you might have some positional power as a leader in the lodge, but oftentimes you're asking people to do things based on their volunteer hours, right? There is even inside of businesses, we talk about being persuasive is more important than using your authority all the time.
I just wrote down 2 words that I want to get to here: structural versus practical. So in Masonry, a lot of our structural leadership is the opening and the closing of the lodge. There's ritual that we say everybody has a part or a role to play. We usually follow agendas or some sort of flow when it comes to the structure of our meetings. And yes, you can learn leadership principles there by having that confidence to be able to speak. Outside of that, though, is the practical approach to it. When you have a leadership position, like you're the master of the lodge or one of the wardens, and people come up, and now the conversations you're having now require clear vision, or we got to course correct to get here, and the decision making can be emotional, or sometimes it has to be, we need to get an answer to this right away. Why so often is leadership an afterthought when it comes to being part of a Mason or the Masonic experience?
I think that inside of Freemasonry, we count on leadership skills being obtained by osmosis, or just by, so like you said, by doing some of the things in the lodge, and we don't ever step out and think about what are the theoretical frameworks or the psychological principles that we need to use to be an effective leader. So yes, you learn public speaking through, memorizing the ritual a little bit. Maybe you gain more confidence. You mentioned being able to have an agenda and understand bylaws, and some of those things are structures that are set up for you, and those are helpful to be an organized person. But the question becomes, are you a leader of men, or are you someone who is just, sort of managing the minutia of the minutes and the reports, which oftentimes is what we see in Freemasonry.
What sometimes gets special is we have also terms that we use in Freemasonry, and one that you're going to be like, oh yeah, I know this one, the trestle board, which the trestle board is basically the strategic vision that a master will bring to his lodge. Now, it can also contain the calendar of the year and the events that we're going to do and how we're going to do them, or maybe special events or dinners or other things. But this is a real testing point, I think, for a lot of brothers when it comes to becoming a leader, because I've heard the lodge experience to be kind of described as a sandbox. And for those that don't have these interactions every day in their personal or professional lives, they get to have them in a lodge experience. How is that beneficial, besides the fact that it's like having training wheels, but how is this beneficial as from an educational standpoint to a member?
Well, the good news is it's usually a low stakes environment. And in low stakes environments, you're more willing to take risks and try new things, which is where our growth kicks in and where we learn new things by trying new things. There's some structure, like we've mentioned, so you're not just sort of left to your own devices to come up with everything on your own. So that's helpful. The main way that we sort of hope that people gain leadership skills in the craft is through the modeling of other leaders. And that is very important. We can look for mentors and those kinds of things. But I think it's also important to think about, are there steps that we can learn from the leadership literature that can help us be more persuasive leaders? Because you need to lead people towards something. If you can be convincing, it'll probably make for a better year or 2 years of whatever leadership position you're in.
I'm sure you've read this book. You possibly even have a copy or 3 that you've given to others over the years. Simon Sinek was the first to kind of make the popular phrase, start with why. Why is it important for leaders to focus on that instead of starting or focusing on the what of a situation?
Simon Sinek famously says, nobody cares about what you do. They care about why you do it. And what he means by that is that purpose is the most important thing, and those are why questions. And why questions are qualitative questions. They're not quantitative questions that you can answer with numbers. And so we often, if we come out of a business situation into the lodge, we're very analytical minded in our personality, we'll want to just make sure that we're hitting whatever goals as measured by X, Y, and Z. But the why question, which is about vision, purpose, and meaning, is qualitative. And you have to ask, okay, what is our lodge's general purpose? And then second, what is my purpose as a leader personally? And then how do I get other people to buy into that? And it's important because that's what people will, quote unquote, die for, right? They're not going to work harder and harder just because of some particular incentives that you create or just because you tell them to. They're going to work hard in the lodge towards a common goal because they find meaning and purpose. And so Sinek gives, the famous example of Apple, that their why is more about challenging the status quo. It's not about making computers or iPhones. It's really about challenging the status quo. And because they have that ethos, they're able to make all kinds of products that we will buy, right? Even Apple TVs now that we're watching, which doesn't seem like it should be related to desktop computers.
Or their whole Apple TV production line that's come with all the media they have to create for these devices. But one of the key things that I saw in at least my personal life, and then applied it to my professional life and started realizing the massive difference, was getting to the point of being the master of my profession, right? And like as the master of the lodge. And Masons will get what I'm talking about here, where there's kind of a check down from the master through the wardens at certain parts during the opening and the closing of the lodge. And I quickly started looking at that and going, oh, that kind of reminds me of the stages of how management is, where you have executives, you have senior leaders, and then you have managers. And that lower level management always stinks because you're literally just managing problems. How do I get away from that to being the person who's handling the bigger things like the vision or the solutions instead of just managing the problems? And to your point, when you talk about when you start focusing on the why, you understand the motivations of individuals. You start to understand some of the root causes of problems so that you're going past being a firefighter to a problem solver.
Yeah, and I would say there is a difference between leadership and management. I think lodges are great at creating efficient managers, maybe not so great at creating leaders. What's the difference? There's an old story from Stephen Covey. He says, imagine we're a team and our job is to cut a path through the jungle. He says the manager's job is to be down there making sure the machetes and tools are sharpened, that people are getting food and water, that everyone's feeling that they're getting breaks and all those things. The leader's job is to climb the tree and make sure we're actually headed in the right direction to begin with. And many times what we're doing is practicing really great management skills, which are necessary and needed. Everything we've talked about up to this point of learning how to publicly speak, gaining more confidence, learning how to work an agenda, being organized, planning. The trestle board is about strategic planning, right? These different things are very important. But unless you can be the one that has the vision or collective vision of your group, you might be cutting the path in the wrong direction very efficiently.
So I told myself after seeing your Convinced, the Persuasive Art and Science of Leadership program, that I was going to do this next problem as an icebreaker the next time I visit a lodge, which is the candle problem, which I saw this, I was like, oh, this is genius. It's a classic test of problem solving where a group gets given a candle and a box of thumbtacks and matches with the instruction to attach the candle to the wall so that the wax doesn't drip on the floor. Sounds pretty simple, but a lot of groups fail. And in that is the whole group dynamic and leadership that comes out of it. But you kind of take it to a different direction when you talk about the context of like lodge business and how sometimes like financial benefits or rewards, like maybe switching a caterer or to a different caterer to save money on dinner, for example, why that might fail to motivate brothers from being creative in settings.
Yeah, and this comes from Dan Pink's book. It's called Drive, and he's citing this experiment called the candlestick problem. And what they found is that the first condition they put people in to solve the problem, they would say, you're being timed on how fast you can finish in this problem and solve it. And the faster you do it, the more money you'll get. That was condition one. Condition two was figure out how to, put the candle on the wall without dripping candles everywhere and put it on the wall somehow. And we're going to time you about how fast you can do it, but there was no financial incentives. And they found that the group that had no financial incentives finished and solved the problem 3.5 minutes faster than those that actually were given financial incentives. And the answer to the problem is you take the box of tacks, you dump out all the tacks, you take the tacks and you put the tacks through the box onto the wall, then you put the candlestick in the box and then you can light it, right? Where most people don't even imagine that the box of tacks could be part of the solution. They're trying to just stick a candle to the wall with tacks or melt the side somehow or something like that. But really, the answer is the box of tacks, right? And his argument is that when you require creative problem solving, it's better not to put people into if-then constraints with monetary incentives attached because it shuts down the part of the brain that is creative. And so you're not going to get very creative things. So if you're just making widgets and you get $1 per widget, sure, that works fine. But in most of our jobs and organizations and in lodges and things, things are a lot more complicated and you need creative problem solving.
Another thing that your program, and again, you can watch this on YouTube, and the link to see Brother Ted's program, Convince the Science of Persuasive Leadership. The link to see that is in the notes for this episode. Just open up your player and you can click on it right there. It is the cute one. You talk about the puppy dog principle. What is this? And I thought it was kind of fascinating on how you summarize leaders can use this for buy-in on bigger or large projects.
Yeah, so if our goal as a leader is to paint this vivid vision that we're leading people towards, and now we're into tactics of how to persuade people, including using authority in a positive way, making sure that we understand people are emotional. Another way to think about this is to ask people for small commitments in order to get bigger ones. So for instance, the puppy dog principle is if you go to a pet store and you're looking at the puppy dogs in the case there, in their little habitat that they have them running around in, the people don't come up and say, would you like to buy that bulldog? What do they ask you? They ask you, would you like to hold that puppy? Would you like to play with it in that little pen room that they have over there, right?
The trick question, yeah.
And if you say yes, then they know that you're going to buy the puppy dog, right? Because once you're holding that puppy dog and you're getting to know it, it's a lot harder to say no to the ask. So they ask you something small and then to something big. And they found this to be true in many experiments. So for example, people canvassing for political parties, if they just go to a door and ask you to put a big political sign in your yard, they'll say no most of the time. But if you ask someone, hey, would you just put this little sticker as a tiny, 2-inch by 2-inch sticker in your window for the political candidate? Most people say sure. And if you come back later and ask for the big sign, then they'll say yes. Same thing, you see this with the charities online, and even our Masonic charities, they ask for a small donation. And then once they get the small donation or the reoccurring small donation, they'll come ask for bigger ones later. Because the studies show that you're more likely to do that. It's a foot in the door technique, right? So that's one way to help persuade people is start small.
The important part, I think, when it comes to leadership is you should always be self-evaluating. And you talk about this in your discussion where, yes, what is a leader's job? They provide the vision, they provide the plan, they provide that coaching, the persuading to get people to things. They're aware of the goals, they're looking for the opportunities, they see the problems. We can all think of good leaders, whether it's sports or in business or whatever the setting is. What is the first step, though, when it comes to auditing yourself and I imagine a listener right now is like, well, I have a really hard time talking people into doing something or getting people to do things for me. And would that not make me a good leader?
Well, what I often hesitate when I teach these principles of persuasion is they can be used for good or for bad, right? And
right.
So it's really important that whatever vision you're going towards is grounded in pro-social values, whether those are, faith, hope, and charity, or brotherly love, or relief and truth, or 4 cardinal virtues, or some other sort of values that are positive that you're grounded in. If you have a positive vision, that can help you audit yourself and make sure, again, remember we talked about cutting the path in the forest and the jungle, and if you're not headed in the right direction, you need to sort of correct course. Well, if you don't have that really strong vision that is grounded in pro-social values, it's easy to get off course, but it can serve as your North Star to audit yourself. And are my actions, are our initiatives, are our goals, is our progress towards this bigger picture? It also helps to get rid of stuff that may be interesting but not important to the core vision and mission of what you're trying to accomplish. So it can be a screening mechanism too. Here's our vision. Someone suggested this really interesting project, but does it align with what we're trying to accomplish with our vision? No? Okay, then maybe that gets put to the back burner instead of to the front, which is often what happens. The loudest voices get the things to the front. But if you can point out, we all agreed on this vision that we're working on together. Does that really fit that, or how does it help me see? You can make some decisions and you can audit yourself and sort of the progress you're making in your organization.
I teased on this earlier, but I wanted to come back to it because I heard a brother say this one time, and it kind of blew me away. Where public speaking, putting together a budget, leading others was not part of his profession. He was in the IT. Well, he still is in the IT world, so he kind of works independently on projects. Was like in a mid-management level, so budgeting and some of these things weren't a big concern. And public speaking, definitely not, being someone who was back in the server or a rack room. And he kind of credited getting the opportunity to be master of the lodge as an opportunity for him to come out of the shell. The thing that's always funny is he says he's one of the worst public speakers that's out there, but he's the kind of guy that once he gets started, good luck trying to get him to stop. he's never had a problem with it.
Yep.
I think one of the things that is beneficial for brothers is that we do have this progressive line and that concept of going through the chairs and learning these parts. How is that helpful in your opinion for guys that Freemasonry is the entry point into them becoming a leader, not only in their lodge, but also in their life?
The progressive line does a couple of interesting and positive things. The first one is it's scaffolded in its learning. So the junior warden has to know less than the senior warden, ritual-wise and otherwise, and responsibilities-wise than the master, right? And so you have this opportunity to slowly learn. Like when you're learning a language, you don't just start reading books in that language. You start with some basic vocabulary, then you conversational, then you get to expert, right? So a similar sort of scaffolding of learning is helpful. There's also the modeling aspect that we've talked about, which is you get to see someone ahead of you and how they've done it and what worked and what didn't. Of course, there's also Grand Lodge initiatives for line officers to do leadership training and those kinds of things. But there's also some bad things about the progressive line. One is that sometimes in some lodges, it locks in somebody who gets into the line that isn't a good leader and isn't good for the lodge and puts them into a position of power for 1 or more years, depending on the terms that your lodge has in its bylaws. And so you have to be careful there, like how do we help someone that we see that is going to be master at some point that might not be great for the lodge? Because we've all experienced one bad master can set a lodge back 5 to 10 years, and so how do you help them to, if they're going to be the master no matter what, almost, how do we help sort of train and model those kinds of things? And that, of course, comes in from the Grand Lodge, past masters, and those kind of modeling.
To the other point, I think one of the benefits of a progressive line is getting to see an example of something. And good or bad, I've always said that bad managers are sometimes the best examples or the best learning situations on how to become a better version of yourself.
Yeah, what not to do, right?
Exactly.
And we do know from social science and the persuasive leadership literature that modeling is one of the most effective ways to help people come along. So I don't know if you remember, but when I was a kid, we had Dare to keep a kid off drugs at school.
Yes, yeah, I remember the shirts. Yeah,
we had Officer Friendly come talk to us about X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Well, when they looked back at the data from that program from the 90s, they found it was actually a very ineffective program for keeping kids off drugs.
Really?
They wondered why, and they looked at other programs, and they found that the most effective program for keeping kids off drugs was Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And the reason is because there's someone in your orbit assigned to you that is modeling and role modeling a different way of living than maybe someone just coming in and telling you not to do drugs, which kids often hear as do drugs.
Yep. I'm thinking of the South Park episode. Yeah, drugs are bad, okay? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, very interesting. Your program, it got into a lot of the, technical and, higher ed. You did a great job of breaking down the lessons and making it practical for all the brothers, as I said, to go from kind of situational or structural leadership to the opportunity to actually be a practical and putting things in out with an intention to lead. I want to get to you personally, because as a past master, you've got a wealth of examples and experience. And as a brother Mason, like, was there a particular moment where you could point back and say, like, wow, even with my professional or educational training in leadership, this principle got tested. I was tested in this moment, and I was able to use Masonry as my own sandbox.
Oh yeah, I've done that a lot, and I'm only a past master of a research lodge. Having been an orator for many years and trying to do the educational programs and lead others and being a trustee of the lodge and those kinds of things, you see all kinds of things. And I'll just give you an example. I don't love going to business meetings because they're boring, and I sit in business meetings all day, right? And sometimes I think in my head and I have these feelings like, why are we talking about this? And I want to say that, right? I want to say, why are we even doing this? And then I step back and say, this is somebody's chance to learn and play in the sandbox, like you say, in this low stakes place, express their opinions and be able to talk about why they want to do it this way or that way. And that's all right. And just let it go. And the importance of even that boring business meeting, which we hold on a different night than stated in our lodge so we can get to the fun stuff. I have similar feelings to you sometimes. Other lodges I belonged to in the past have had very large balances of funds, and yet we're never raising dues, or we're never, getting any good catering or food or events, or the lodge building's falling apart. You know what I mean? So those are frustrating things. And I think that I've had to learn, like you were talking about earlier, there's reasons behind that, especially from the Great Depression folks who are still around and the way they feel about things. And if you can meet them on an emotional level on specific fixes or things that you need to do around the lodge, they'll come along, but not until you listen to what they have to say and why.
That's a really strong point, Ted, that when you take a step back and realize as a leader that sometimes this moment isn't your moment. This isn't your learning moment. It's somebody else's opportunity. And you get to kind of be literally in the audience for some of those. Last night I was on a call and I'm like, these two guys are going to spend the whole time arguing about something that is just really, but it was just interesting because eventually the one guy quit trying to just, as we talked about, quit trying to keep providing facts and rationalize. And we got to, it was the change, the idea that we were going to change a process. And that was just the underlying thing that the other brother that was opposed to. And once we said, but this doesn't change the way you're going to do this. This is just going to change the way that we're going to do this as a lodge. You're still free to do this however you want to execute it. Oh, it was like, yeah, man, you could have spared us all 50 minutes. But I understand that. And it was just neat sitting there going, oh, I want to say something. I want to get involved, but just going, this isn't for me. This is for this other brother. This is his time to figure this out.
Yeah, and that's applying your practical wisdom you learn along the way, when to step up, when to step back.
Oh, trust me, after 15 minutes, I was ready to step in.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks again to my guest this week, Worshipful Brother Ted Cross, past master of the Arizona Lodge of Research. We're going to get some extra time with him. We call it a subscriber extra episode. Oh, yeah. Brother Ted is going to get deeper into the science, how it's kind of like our call to convince others how to act, and honestly, how being a leader in the lodge is going to move beyond basic management to some of the more psychology of how we can win hearts and minds. We're really getting into it on Thursday with our subscriber extra. If you'd like to become a Patreon subscriber of Craftsman Online, you can start your free 7-day trial and get all the info in the notes for this episode. I'm Right Worshipful Brother Michael Arce. Ooh, a good one is on tap. Next Monday, Worshipful Brother Gordon Moschio is going to be joining us. He's the author of the new book, By the Signs We Know Them, a little head of the America 250 spirit, as we'll be talking about Masonic bonds in the Civil War. Until Monday, let peace and harmony prevail.